I have returned finally from my 2 weeks' absence. My friends have been here in Ruletensburg for 3 days already. I thought that they would be expecting me, God knows how eagerly, but I was wrong. The general had an extremely unconcerned air, talked to me condescendingly for a few minutes, then sent me off to his sister. Clearly, they had managed to borrow some money along the way. It even appeared to me that the general looked somewhat embarrassed. Maria Filipovna seemed to be extremely busy and barely exchanged a few words with me. She took the money, however, counted it, and listened to my whole report. They were expecting Mezentsev for dinner, also the little Frenchman and an Englishman. As usual, the moment there was some money in the house, there had to be a dinner party. That's Moscow style for you. Polina Alexandrovna, upon seeing me, asked why I had been away so long, and without giving me a chance to answer, went off somewhere. Of course, she did that on purpose. We ought to have a heart-to-heart talk, though. There's a lot of talk about. I was assigned a tiny room on the first floor of the hotel. They know here that I belong to the general's suite. It all shows that they have managed to impress people. Everybody here takes the general for a fabulously wealthy Russian magnate. Even before dinner he managed to let me, among other errands, change 2,000-franc bills for him. I changed them at the hotel office. Now, at least for a whole week, we'll be looked upon as millionaires. I was about to take Misha and Nadia for a walk, but when I was on the stairs, the general called me back. He felt it necessary to ask where I was taking them. This man positively can't look me straight in the eye. He would like to very much, but every time he tries it, I respond with such an intent, or rather disrespectful gaze, that he seems embarrassed. In very pompous language, piling one sentence on another and getting hopelessly entangled in the end, he let me know that I was to take the children for their walk somewhere away from the casino in the park. Finally, he became quite angry and added sternly, "Or else you might perhaps take them to the casino, to the roulette tables. You must excuse me," he added, "but I know you are still young and lack proper judgment, and you might perhaps be inclined to take up gambling. In any case, though I am not your mentor, nor do I want to play that role, at least I have the right to express my wish that you should not, so to speak, compromise me." "But I haven't got any money," I answered calmly, "and in order to lose some money you must have some in the first place." "You shall have it at once," the general answered, flushing a little. Having rummaged through his bureau, he checked his notebook, and it turned out that he owed me about 120 rubles. "How are we to settle?" he went on to say. "We'd have to convert it into thalers. Here, why don't you take 100 thalers for a round figure? I will settle the balance later." I took the money without a word. "Please, don't feel offended by my words. You're so touchy. If I gave you a hint, it was only, so to speak, by way of warning you, and I have, of course, a certain right to do so." As I was returning home with the children before dinner, I ran into the whole cavalcade. Our party had been for a drive to some ruins. 2 magnificent carriages, beautiful horses. In one carriage, Mademoiselle Blanche, Maria Filipovna, and Polina. The little Frenchman, the Englishman, and our general on horseback. Passers-by stopped and stared. The effect was there. However, it would have to end badly for the general. I figured that with the 4,000 francs which I had brought, added to what they had evidently managed to borrow in the meantime, they had now 7,000 or 8,000 francs, which was not nearly enough for Mademoiselle Blanche. Mademoiselle Blanche and her mother are also staying at our hotel, and our little Frenchman isn't very far away either. The servants call him Monsieur le Comte. Mademoiselle Blanche's mother is called Mademoiselle la Comtesse. Well, who knows, maybe they are really Comte and Comtesse. I knew beforehand that Monsieur le Comte would not recognize me when we met at dinner. The general, of course, would not have thought of introducing us or even mentioning me to him, and as for Monsieur Comte, he had been to Russia himself. He knows that there a tutor is very small fry indeed. However, he knows me very well, but I must confess that I showed up at dinner uninvited. Apparently the general had forgotten to make arrangements for me, or else he would certainly have sent me to have my dinner at the table d'hôte. So I came of my own accord, and the general looked at me with displeasure. Kind-hearted Maria Filipovna immediately made a place for me, but It was my having met Mr. Astley that saved the situation for me. Because of this, I could not help seeming to belong to the party. I first met this strange Englishman in Prussia on a train where we were seated facing each other. This was when I was on my way to join the family. Later, I ran into him on my way to France and finally in Switzerland. Twice then during those past 2 weeks, and now there he was again in Roulettenburg. I never met a man so shy in my life. He is shy to the point of being stupid, and he knows it very well, of course, because he is by no means stupid. Yet he is a very sweet and gentle person. I made him talk when we first met in Prussia. He told me that he had been at North Cape earlier in the summer, and that he was very anxious to visit the fair at Nizhny Novgorod. I don't know how he became acquainted with the general. It seems to me that he is hopelessly in love with Polina. When she entered, he flushed crimson. He was very glad that I sat next to him at the table, and apparently he already considers me his bosom friend. At dinner, a little Frenchman set the tone of the conversation in quite singular fashion. He is nonchalant and condescending with everybody. In Moscow, too, as I remember, he used to be full of hot air. He talked a great deal about finance and about Russian politics. The general would sometimes venture to contradict, but discreetly, just enough so as not to lose his dignity altogether. I was in a strange mood. Of course, before the dinner was half over, I was asking myself that invariable and familiar question, why do I hang around with this general, and why didn't I leave this crowd long ago? From time to time I glanced at Polina. She took no notice of me whatever. Finally I got mad and decided to be rude. It all started when I suddenly, in a loud voice and for no reason at all, barged into someone else's conversation. Most of all, I wanted to pick a quarrel with the little Frenchman. I turned around to the general and quite loudly and distinctly interrupting him, observed that this summer it was virtually impossible for a Russian to dine at a hotel, the Blue Dot. The general stared at me in disbelief. "If you have any self-respect at all," I went on, "you'll surely end up being abused and suffering all kinds of affronts to your dignity. In Paris and on the Rhine, and even in Switzerland, the table d'hôte are so crowded with all sorts of little Poles and little Frenchmen sympathizing with them, that you couldn't get a word in edgewise so long as you are Russian." I said this in French. A general was looking at me bewilderedly, not knowing whether he should get angry or simply be amazed at my forgetting myself to such an extent. "So someone, somewhere, gave you a lesson in manners," said the little Frenchman, nonchalantly and contemptuously. "In Paris I first had a fight with the Pole," I answered, "and then with the French officer who was back in the Pole. But then some of the French came over to my side as I told them how I almost spit into Monsignor's coffee." "Spit?" asked the general with dignified perplexity, casting glances around the table. A little Frenchman looked at me suspiciously. "Exactly so, sir," I answered. "Since I was convinced for 2 whole days that I might have to take a short trip to Rome in connection with that business of ours, I went to the office of the Holy Father's embassy in Paris to get my visa. There I was met by a little abbé, 50ish, all dried up and with a frosty expression on his face. After listening to me politely, though extremely coldly, he asked me to wait. Though I was in a hurry, I sat down, of course, took out my Opinion Nationale, and began reading some horribly abusive verbiage directed against Russia. Meanwhile, I heard someone else being ushered into the Monsignor's office through the next room, and also saw my abbé bow to that person. I addressed the same request to him once more, and again he asked me to wait, but still more coldly this time. A little later another caller came in, but on business, an Austrian, apparently. He was listened to and led upstairs without delay. Now I became very much annoyed. I got up, walked up to the abbé, and told him resolutely that, since the Monsignor was receiving callers, he might as well take care of me also. At once the abbé drew back, extraordinarily surprised. It was simply beyond his comprehension how a worthless Russian could put himself on an equal footing with the Monsignor's guests. And, in the most insolent tone, as if it gave him pleasure to insult me, he measured me from head to foot and shouted, Do you really expect the Monsignor to leave his coffee on your account? Then I too shouted, but still louder than he did. Let me tell you that I spit on your Monsieur's coffee. If you won't take care of my passport this very moment, I'll go and see him myself. What? When the Cardinal is there with him? Cried the little abbé, backing away from me in horror. Then he rushed to the door, spread his arms wide, and stood there like a cross, with an air of being ready to die rather than let me through. To which I responded that I was a heretic and barbarian, and that I didn't care a bit for all his archbishops, cardinals, monsignors, etc. In short, I let him know that I wasn't giving up. The abbé gave me a look full of the deepest hatred, then snatched my passport from me and took it upstairs. A minute later I had my visa. Here, would you care to see it? And I took out my passport and showed the Roman visa. You should, however, the general began. What saved you was that you declared yourself a barbarian and heretic, the little Frenchman remarked with a smile. Really, why should I model myself on our Russians here? Here they are, sitting around not daring to utter a word and ready, I suppose, to deny that they are Russians. At my Paris hotel, at least, they began to treat me much more attentively after I had told them about my run-in with the abbé. A fat Polish pen, my greatest enemy at the table d'hôte, faded away into the background. Frenchmen even showed no resentment when I told them that 2 years ago I had met a man at whom, in 1812, a French infantryman had fired simply in order to discharge his rifle. The man was then a child of 10, and his family had not managed to leave Moscow in time. That's impossible, the little Frenchman shouted, flying into a rage. French soldier wouldn't fire at a child. Yet it happened, I answered. The man who told me the story was a most respectable retired captain, and I saw the bullet scar on his cheek myself. The Frenchman now began talking rapidly and at great length. The general made an effort to back him up, but I suggested that he read, for instance, some excerpts from the memoirs of General Perovsky, who was a prisoner of the French in 1812. Finally, Maria Filipovna started talking about something else to change the subject. The general was very much displeased with me, for the Frenchman and I had almost shouted at each other. But Mr. Astley apparently enjoyed my argument with the Frenchman very much. Getting up from the table, he asked me if I would like to have a glass of wine with him. That night I duly succeeded in having a talk with Polina. It lasted for about a quarter of an hour and took place while we were all out for a walk. We went to the park by the casino. Polina sat down on a bench facing the fountain and let Nadia play with some children not far away. I, too, let Misha run off to the fountain, and we were at last alone. Business was discussed first, naturally. Polina was simply furious when I handed her only 700 gulden. She had been quite sure that I was going to pawn her diamonds in Paris for at least 2,000 gulden, or even more. I absolutely need some money, she said, and I have to get it or else I am simply lost. I went on to ask her about what had happened during my absence. Nothing but 2 messages from Petersburg. First, that grandmother was very ill, and 2 days later, that she had apparently died. The news came from Timofey, Polina added, and he is a reliable man. We are expecting a final, definitive message. So everybody here is full of anticipation? I asked. Of course, each and everyone. This has been everybody's only hope for the past 6 months. Are you hoping too? I asked. Why, I am no relation of hers. I am only the general's stepdaughter, but I am positively sure that she will remember me in her will. I would imagine that you might get a great deal, I said affirmatively. Yes, she was fond of me. But what makes you think so? Tell me, I answered with a question. Our Marquise, it seems, is also initiated into all family secrets. And what about you? Why are you so interested in this? Asked Polina, giving me a cold and stern look. Of course I am interested. If I am not entirely wrong, the general has already managed to borrow some money from him. You have guessed quite correctly. Well, do you think that he would have given him any money if he had not known about grandmother? Did you notice at dinner, some 3 times he referred to grandmother as Babulinka, La Babulinka? What intimate and cordial relations. Yes, you're right. The moment he finds out that I too have inherited something from her, he will immediately propose to me. Is that what you wanted to know? So he will propose. I thought that he had been proposing to you for a long time. You know perfectly well that isn't true, Polina said testily. Where did you meet the Englishman? She added after a moment's silence. I knew that you were going to ask about him. I told her about my previous meeting with Mr. Ashley and my journey. He's bashful and romantic and quite naturally in love with you, isn't he? Yes, he is in love with me, answered Polina. And also quite naturally, he is 10 times as rich as the Frenchman. Do you think that the Frenchman really has something? Isn't that open to doubt? No, it's not. He has some sort of chateau. Only yesterday the general mentioned it to me quite positively. Well, are you satisfied? If I were you, I would definitely marry the Englishman. Why? Asked Polina. Frenchman is more handsome, but he is a lower sort. And the Englishman, besides being honest, is 10 times as rich, I snapped. Yes, but on the other hand, the Frenchman is a marquis and more clever, she answered in the calmest manner possible. Are you sure? I continued in the same vein. Absolutely. Polina didn't like my questions at all, and I could see that she was trying to make me angry by the tone and the absurdity of her answers, all of which I let her know at once. Well, now, it really amuses me to see you getting worked up about this. You ought to pay for the mere fact that I am allowing you to ask such questions and to make such suppositions. As a matter of fact, I do consider myself entitled to ask you all kinds of questions, I answered calmly, precisely because I am ready to pay any price for them, and my life means nothing to me now. Polina burst out laughing. You told me last time at the Schlagenburg that you were ready at a single word from me to throw yourself down head first, and it is 1,000-foot drop there, I think. Some day I shall say the word, just to see how you pay your debts, and you can be sure that I'll stand firm. I loathe you, precisely because I have allowed you so much, and I loathe you even more because I need you so. But for the time being I need you, and so I must spare you. She got up. She had spoken with irritation. Of late she would invariably end up irritated and hating me after talking to me, truly hating me. Allow me to ask, what about Mademoiselle Blanche? I asked, not wanting to let her go without an explanation. You know all about Mademoiselle Blanche yourself. Nothing has happened since. Mademoiselle Blanche is probably going to be the general's wife, that is, of course, if the rumor of grandmother's death is confirmed. For Mademoiselle Blanche, her mother, and her third cousin, the Marquise, they all know very well that we are ruined financially. And is the general hopelessly in love? That doesn't matter now. Listen and remember, take this 700 florins and go gambling. Win for me as much as you can at roulette. I need some money now, come what may. Having said this, she called Nadia and walked away toward the casino, where she joined the rest of the party. I turned into the first path to the left, thinking and wondering. I felt as if someone had hit me over the head after her orders to play roulette for her. Strange thing, there was plenty for me to think about, yet I lost myself in analyzing my reactions to my feelings for Polina. Actually, I felt better during those 2 weeks away from her than now, on the day of my return, even though I had been constantly fretting and had run about like a madman, even dreamed of her all the time. Once, that was in Switzerland, I fell asleep on the train, and, it seems, started talking aloud to Polina, to the amusement of all the other passengers, and so again I asked myself the question, do I love her? And again I found myself unable to answer it. Or, rather, for the 100th time I answered to myself that I hated her. Yes, she was hateful to me. There were moments, especially every time we concluded one of our conversations, when I would have gladly given half my life for the privilege of strangling her. I swear that if I had been given a chance to bury a sharp knife slowly in her breast, I probably would have reached for that knife with relish. Yet I swear by all that is sacred that if she had really told me up there at Schlagensburg's tourist point to throw myself down, I would have done so at once, and even relished it too. I knew that. One way or another, The thing had to be settled. All this she understands amazingly well, and the thought that I knew quite positively and distinctly how utterly beyond reach she was for me, this thought, I am convinced, gave her extraordinary pleasure. Why else would she, a prudent and clever girl, be on so intimate and open terms with me? Up to now she seemed to look on me as if she were that empress of antiquity who began to undress before her slave because she did not consider him a man. Yes, many a time she had refused to look on me as a man. I had her command, however, to win at roulette, come what may. I had no time to give any thought to why or how soon I had to win, or what new scheme had taken shape in that ever-calculating brain of hers. Moreover, there had apparently developed in the course of these 2 weeks a multitude of new facts of which I had yet no idea. I had to figure it all out and try to get to the bottom of things as quickly as possible, but at this point there was no time for it. I had to go and play roulette.